Good afternoon, everybody. Let's bring the committee of the whole meeting to order for September the 3rd, 2024. Please, we acknowledge that the Northern Rockies is located in the heart of the traditional territory of the Dene, Cree, and Danezaa people of the Fort Nelson First Nation, as well as the Prophet River First Nation. We further recognize the rights inherent in our treaty, and finally, we also celebrate the contributions and the enduring presence of the Métis people in our region. Please be advised that tonight's meeting is available for the public to attend virtually, is being streamed and recorded. Are there any council additions? Are there any staff additions? None. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on anything on the agenda. Anybody in the gallery? No? Okay. Everybody's okay with the agenda the way it is. That brings us to the committee of the whole report number 10, 2024, which is the Food Cycler Pilot Program results. Staff, please. Welcome, Mitch.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So the report in front of you is for discussion about the food cycler and sharing the results. Essentially, nine of the units were provided to the nonprofits in SD 81 through the second resolution that was made, with the remainder going to residents in the municipality. One of the things that I'm not sure if it reflects in the report, but there were significant 25 to about 30 households that did inquire post sale of all the units. The big reason here about the report being for discussion is just in conclusion, with some of the conclusions of the pilot program, it is noted that there is a gap in waste management solutions that can be further explored. These solutions can reduce waste management costs, achieve environmental goals. And just regarding these solutions, the Environmental Advisory Committee would best be positioned to explore these.
Okay. Thank you for that. It's pretty obvious from the report that this pilot program was a huge success, right? And accomplished all of the goals I think that everybody was looking for. And as it says in the report, even the bit around not just getting people to do it, but getting people interested in doing more of these kind of things. And that's as important to me as the fact that that people were knocking off bags of garbage that they didn't have to put out. So I'm really happy that it went the way it did, and I am looking forward to putting this, hearing what everybody on council has to say, but also moving it forward to see if we can do something similar to what Nelson did. They ingrained it into their community. So floor is open for anybody else who has a comment. Councilor Curling?
Yeah, I did get through this report. I think something that really stuck out for me was the people that were really interested after hearing what other people's experiences were. So to know that there's 25 to 30 people or households that are interested, I think that this is something that we absolutely should do again if we can. I don't know whether it has to go back to the EAC or whether it can just come back to council for decision. If Food Cycler Canada is interested in doing another 100 units here, and we can use the money from what's the name of that funding piece?
LGCAP.
Thank you, the LGCAP. If the money's there, maybe staff can do a report. I don't know how council feels. Does it have to go back to the EAC, or can we as council just move ahead with it? I would like to just move ahead with it, but I mean, obviously it's the council's decision. And then something that I really was interested in is in the report or the presentation where in Nelson, BC, they do the free bulk carbon refill station in their local Safeway. So I've had to replace mine, and I don't know that there is somebody local. There might be, but I haven't found it as yet. So to know that we can refill it and free would be like really good, because like I paid, I forget, $30, I think. And mine lasted 3 months, and then I had to refill my carbon. Like if you use it less often, then you can replace it less. But Yes, so, and also the full warranty and local repair program, that I think would be really great. Yeah, so Nelson has some really great recommendations in here that I would like to see us explore further to keep this project going. And then the last thing that I'll say, it's just been wonderful to see it happening in the schools. That's was our primary focus, was to reach the kids that are coming up, and hopefully that they will do it throughout their lifespan. Shala was really interested. They took units. I know just because I have a connection at the high school, all the kids that are in the home ec program see it now, right? Because they were diverting to vermicompost, but now they can do the food cycler, and then that is going to vermicompost. So yeah, it's just really exciting to see how the kids are just excited about, whoa, look what it looks like, right? So we're putting our food scraps in here, and then the next day they get to see the end result of that. So yeah, I'll stop there, but if anybody is interested in moving it forward within council, I would definitely support that. Thanks.
Well, the part about what Nelson is doing, all of the potential opportunities, that's what I thought the EOC could explore. Some of those opportunities in the community that Nelson is doing, like whether or not one of the grocery stores would, that those sort of ideas that they had, that's what I thought would be a topic for the EOC to explore. Anybody else comments on the program? Councillor Dickey?
I think the stats are amazing, that only 100 homes participated, and it created or diverted 30.3 metric tons. So can you imagine if we had 500 homes participating in it? But one of the things I would suggest is for funding opportunities and looking at the carbon refill is the next funding or grant intake for REF BC is November, December. So Nelson did get some of their funding from REF BC to develop their program, and their funding is quite, $225,000 for a year to implement a project. So I would highly recommend that we do that. But yeah, it's a great program, and I'm happy to see the results.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much, Mitch. Well, I guess where do we go? Do we wanna put it to the EOC for them to at least come back and recommend or see if they'll take on some of this work?
Well, so being the chair of the EAC, the EAC is an advisory committee. We currently don't have community members that really want to walk away with a piece of work to do,
Okay.
right? So they're very much there to advise. And that's what the expectation of council was. So that's why I don't really see that this would go back to the EAC, because then they're just going
Because
to
they-
advise that,
Yeah.
and then it's going to come. So it's just another,
Okay.
just take a little bit longer. But if I don't know, can I make a motion, or do I do a notice of motion for the next meeting? Like,
I think we
what's
can
the
bring it to the
procedure
meeting
here?
this afternoon, if you feel that there's if there's a motion that you want to make, I think we can put it on the agenda.
Okay, so I would make a motion that,
We'll do that,
Good.
sorry, at the regular meeting, right?
Oh,
We don't
yeah,
make decisions
okay,
at- we
yeah,
don't make
okay.
decisions at the
Sure.
committee level.
okay,
So we'll add it to the agenda this afternoon. We'll bring that report forward, and then you can make a motion.
okay.
Okay. Yep. Next on the agenda is the committee of the whole report 1124, the draft management plan, backcountry protected areas. Somebody in staff to speak to this report? Hmm.
Oh, sorry, I thought you just said the. I thought we were on the community agenda.
No, did I skip ahead? I didn't miss one, did I? No, 5.2, 11.24. Lisa's name's on it. Welcome, surprise.
Well, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. So apparently I put together a fairly lengthy report for your consideration, considering the draft management plan for the backcountry protected areas of the Musqueam Management Area. So I'll just refer to it as the backcountry plan because that's a really long title. But it's important to note that this draft plan only pertains to the protected areas within the MK under BC Parks jurisdiction. It doesn't apply to the entire MKMA. So the report outlines basically that or identifies that BC Parks is soliciting feedback on their draft plan and that engagement closes on September the 6th. There's some information around the legislation around the intent of the MK and then some information about which parks and protected areas are actually included in the backcountry plan. There's quite a few management objectives and strategies within the draft plan. It's quite lengthy. And there's a summary of that provided in the report in that table on page 2. Just moving on, public engagement was undertaken locally between August 21st and the 23rd. So there was an open house in Toad River, Fort Nelson, and in Fort St. John. And it was an opportunity for the public to provide feedback. It was done in a way that was basically like an open house. You drop in and you provide comment or you put sticky notes on boards. The residents at Toad River didn't really like that approach much, and it turned into a bit of a conversation as opposed to sticky notes. Mr. Fulton noted that the sticky notes weren't very large, so he wasn't able to put his comments on there. And it turned out that BC Parks was quite happy with where they ended up in the conversation that they had. So it was good that they were flexible and was able to get, they were able to get some comments. For next steps, BC Parks has indicated they are going to produce a What We Heard report following the closing of engagement on September the 6th. And that report's going to be discussed with the Northern Rockies Roundtable sometime in November. They've also asked for some feedback around what we might like to see in the way of engagement and how that might look when they start to discuss their front country parks, which would include Liard Hot Springs, Muncho Lake, and then Stone Mountain, which is expected to happen sometime next year. So following the engagement sessions, I met with Jim Little, as well as had a conversation with the residents or some of the residents of Toad River, just to gain some feedback. I think there's some opportunity to get some clarification from the province on the intent of the plan. It was interesting to hear Toad River really wanted to keep that pristine wilderness, but then there was also concerns about when trails could be built, not built, access, and then, you know, updating cabins and things like that. There was also concern around BC Parks seeming to want to create some public spaces, but then not necessarily having the funds or the capacity to actually enforce or to monitor those spaces. So I'll just turn it over to council for discussion, just keeping in mind, like I said previously, that the engagement closes on September the 6th.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Councilor Dickey?
So the August 21 to 23 engagement, or what did you call it, where they stick up sticky open house?
Yeah.
Did council attend? Did we have very many participants? Because we always talk about engagement and the way we do engagement and the number of participants that we're engaging with. The other thing is I looked at the Musqueam Management Board website, and there's no rep from the Fort Nelson First Nation. And I think building those relationships, now that we have a new council out there, is probably pretty key to extend a personal invite to the nations to come and attend the November session. I don't think Fort Nelson First Nation, well, I can't speak for them, but just by reading their land use management plan for the Musqueam, they don't have any like really strong concerns about it because it's really in the Cascadene territory.
Yeah, my understanding is there's a separate process that they're going through with the nations on this. I have a concern and I missed this, and I apologize because I was in town and I missed it. There's another virtual session, I think, here in the next couple of days that I'm scheduled to attend, and I will do that. So it talks about the plan and it talks about the Muskwakachika protected areas. Have the parks been designated yet? Do we know? Have the parks been designated, or that's the process they're going through, is to designate these several areas as parks, and this is the management plan within those parks? Is that where we're at? So they haven't been. So this is going to, not only is it the management plan, but it's actually gonna designate these areas as parks. Is that correct?
So my understanding is that if there's a reason to, then they would eventually want to move to designate them as Class A parks.
Right.
But if there was, say, for example, proposed mineral extraction or something that was to occur in one of these, then there would be reasons why they may not want to. So there's verbiage in here about moving to eventually changing them to Class A if it was appropriate. But I didn't hear anything from Andrea indicating that that was kind of the intent behind it.
Yeah. Cause I see this as a slippery slope kind of a thing. If they haven't, their minds are made up that these are gonna be Class A parks and they're leading us down that trail. And the original intention of the Muskwakachika was an access management area. It was not to keep people out, right? It was not to keep industry out. And often the parks are so restrictive that that's what they eventually accomplish, is that nobody gets to go there. And unless you've got a bunch of horses or enough money that you can pay somebody to get you in there. And that was never the intent of the Muskwakachika access management area. And so to me, I see it as a slippery slope that eventually if your mind goes like my mind, that when we consider the plan for 30% of the province to be protected by 3030, so that's a 3030 plan they're talking about, that eventually this will lead to the entire Muskwakachika becoming a park, because that's a pretty easy way for them to achieve their 3030 objectives without a lot of impact to a lot of people. And so, that might be my conspiracy mind going, but that's my fear with this kind of thing. And I'll probably say that at the meeting that comes up, because it was never intended that the Muskwakachika, be developed as parks. So I'm interested in finding out what has changed and whether or not the board themselves, the Muskwakachika board, supports this, these parks, because I know there are people on there who, when I have spoken to them in the past, didn't agree that the Muskwakachika should be turned into a park. That's why it remained an access management area. Go ahead, Councillor Dickey.
I only have one more comment on this. This report is the Treaty 8 nations and the Fort Nelson First Nation, Prophet River and Blueberry are meeting with Cascadena to talk about a conservation protected area, which is just outside of the management area. So now we're starting to talk bigger and bigger and bigger area. So I think it's really important that Treaty 8, Blueberry and Port Nelson and Prophet River are part of that November engagement. Because they have concerns about the boundary outside of that. And when you talk about resource mining, there is a small mine that's somewhere around Toad River that they're still keep doing test drills that drives the guide and outfitters crazy because it upsets the wildlife. And I'm sure it would upset the nation too.
Yeah. So with respect to the comment you had about membership on the Muskwakachika, and maybe you can clarify this for us, because we were looking this afternoon to see who the members were, and Ryan was on there. So is he?
He's not representing the nation. He's
Okay.
just an interested party.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's what that is.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Okay, are there any other comments about this?
I found that report just kind of confusing from the intent point of view, like what really is the aim to have a bunch of existing parks that it looks like they're leaning toward Class A parks eventually, but they don't want to make that step. But I kind of wonder if is it the lack of are they trying to create a framework for having a future engagement when there's a tangible access issues? Or because does the MK actually meet regularly? Are they actually active in the MK board? Are they actually active looking at this, or is it just a government wanting to have its own stamp on the management of it? It's a bit puzzling to me.
Mm.
And just one thing secondarily to that, and I actually want to second, and that I appreciate you bringing up, Mayor, the access part of the original MK and area access, simply because we have enough examples. I think the most recent example of what took place in Jasper actually illustrates why you don't create a lockout park that doesn't have potential for other things taking place in it. They created a perfect fire pit for a town to live in, and sure enough, that's what happened. So I think that access, Class A designation makes access much more difficult for other necessities that take place or needs for managing, and lack of managing is Jasper. We don't want lack of managing in any of our areas.
Okay, so we'll participate and I guess we'll see what their report looks like in November. That gives me a little bit of hope that there's opportunities for still to have some input. They're not coming back till November. I thought they were trying to put this through much quicker than that, maybe even before the election, but if they're talking about bringing back a report after November, then it's not happening, in the next month or two. So,
Yeah, so the timelines I confirmed with BC Parks were, the engagement closes September 6th. First Nation consultation will continue. The What We Heard report would come out and be somewhat ready for discussion in November. And they wouldn't be looking at plan finalization until spring of 2025.
okay. Do you suggest that we make any kind of a submission?
I think we'd be remiss not to. So, I don't think it needs to be anything too adversarial, but I think there's some points that I heard from Toad River, especially around some of the things around the vision, which I've heard a bit, around the intent, the vision of the park or of the areas within the MK. So I think, there's an opportunity maybe for the province to maybe clarify that somewhat. I think there's opportunity to provide comment just on engagement process in general and ensuring that engagement's tailored to suit the communities and the ensure that people who actually use those areas are well engaged, well informed of what's happening. So I think we should submit something.
And did staff have that in mind as well? Like, do we need to make a resolution for that or later on? And do we need to bring it forward to the regular meeting? Or is direction to staff good enough?
I think, I think considering the discussion, if council wishes to make a recommendation, not a resolution recommendation for us, we can submit something. Based on this conversation.
Okay, so we can make a recommendation here, then if everybody's acceptable that we make a submission, then well, that's we're making a decision. So we're making a decision. So if you think we need something, then we need to put it to the regular council meeting. So let's add that to the agenda this afternoon.
Krista, I think it's your turn. Thank you.
Forward. Okay, next order of business is the Community Identity Downtown Revitalization Plan report for discussion. Staff, please. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So this report comes to you with a little bit more information, just keeping you involved in the loop as we kind of try to move forward with the downtown revitalization plan and the actions and priority items that were established by council earlier this spring. So we're looking at the main priority is to engage with the community to develop a downtown community identity and character plan, which would outline themes, visuals, colors, those sorts of things that could actually be used specifically into anything from picnic tables and the physical aspects of our downtown, the physical look and feel of our downtown, which then would also blend really nicely into a wayfinding and interpretive signage plan, which was also a high priority. So we are looking at putting out RFP to hopefully do both kind of in connection, which then would allow us to move forward into implementation of signage and other aspects altogether. We're not sure what that budget might end up having to look like, so there might need to be further conversations down the line depending on what we get back. But yeah, really looking at this for initially the downtown study area, although with council's direction, it could be used broader than that once we've got it and council has something to review. And then just reviewing, re-highlighting as well that this isn't a corporate rebranding process. So we're not looking at like the logo or anything like that at this time. Yeah, and then kind of just the discussion points that we wanted to bring to council was just if council's supportive of these steps that we've identified and how we've kind of pulled the projects together. And then just if there's any comments right now on whether or not we would look at potentially expanding the budget, looking at budget options if needed, or reducing the project if needed, depending on what we get back from an RFP. Discussion.
Right, so thank you for that report. I think we had put some money in the budget for this to, you know, we weren't ready to start building anything downtown yet, but I think we did want to see this project proceed little by little, and so we put some money away for that, and that's the money you're talking about using.
Yeah.
You're informing us that staff would like to go ahead with an RFP.
Yeah.
And then whatever that comes back, if it comes back shy, we'll have another discussion because there won't be enough money if the RFP is higher than what we're. But essentially, it's you're developing a theme.
Yeah.
Essentially, is what you're.
And then if we can within budget and abilities, if we can tie in that wayfinding and signage component so that we can kind of hit the ball rolling with both aspects, then
Yeah, at
that's
least
the ultimate goal, but we'll
Yeah.
have to see what comes back.
a lot of that work is done already. If you think about the circle route signage, right? So they would at least sort of review that and
Yeah.
determine whether that could fit and whether or not the community is comfortable with that.
Yeah, there would be fit in there for sure. But I could see that there could be some specific locations that might be identified for specific topics might be further identified. There has been some work done in the past from in connection, I believe, with the Historical Society. So there's some stuff out there that might be able to be pulled in, but yeah, looking at that and then what do those signs look like, right? Like you can get very artistic or you can have a square.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to get the public's comments on potential themes. Yeah, good. Any other comments, questions? Hearing none, then I think there's general support for the idea. So, thank you. Okay, that brings us to 5.5, excuse me, which is the community facility fee waiver discussion. Staff, please. Is that you?
She's not feeling good today, so she's
Not here.
taking a hall pass from the meetings tonight. But earlier this year, council reviewed the draft fee waiver policy, which would ultimately replace what's now known as the recreation center rental exemption policy. But it would be an expansion of that to basically relieve
applications from our grant need process for any groups who wish to access our facilities and at no cost. So one of the things that council discussed in that review of the draft policy was what the financial impacts could be based on past use of the space by not-for-profits. And so you'll see there in the report that based on 2023, facility rentals were just over $34,000 in revenues. So not including, that doesn't include amounts that we process through grant aid. So had those groups not been eligible or not received a grant aid, that would have been, that 15.5 would have been tacked on to the 34. There's a bit of discussion within the report about the staff impacts of those rentals. So our current rentals recreation center exemption policy provides 10 hours of staff time for setup and takedown for any groups accessing the spaces under that legacy policy. And then it talks about the staff time that it takes for setup and takedown of our large and small spaces. And of course, that varies depending on the scope of the event and so on and so forth. So looking at that, and then the potential, of course, that if we were to open up eligibility for rental or for fee waivers, we would probably expect there'd be an increased demand for space because now it's just that much more accessible, which could have an impact on staff time. There was a bit of a flag on the arena and community hall kitchen. So just acknowledging that those two spaces require more staff time and they have a higher operational cost than our average kind of warm spaces. For the kitchen, it's requirements for sanitizing and things like that to remain compliant under our health permit. And then for the arena, for obvious reasons, cleaning ice, making ice, and then the overall space of the arena to clean after it's been used. And then the other impact that doesn't necessarily have a financial impact, but just that increasing, if it were a completely open process for accessibility for fee waivers, it could limit the amount that's available for private rentals or even our own programming. So just being mindful of that we want to, it would probably be helpful to achieve some amount of balance so that we're not dealing with frequent cancellations or creating a situation where suddenly the space is booked with absolutely no fees and we don't have space to offer it for funerals or weddings or our own programs. So we did integrate the updates that council discussed and then highlighted some sections in the draft policy just to include some potential maximum values or maximum numbers of waivers. Hopefully that will help kind of mitigate that excessive access to the policy. So looking for your guidance.
Comments or questions from anybody?
Yeah.
Councilor Gurwing, please.
I think it's just a complicated issue. You open one door and you go down the rabbit hole, right? So it would just draw council's attention to under analysis. It says, it is anticipated the sustainable service level project, which is currently being undertaken, will likely conclude that the recreation center fees do not sufficiently provide for the cost to operate most spaces within the facilities. So I think we already know that our fees they're not cost recovery. So on the one hand, I wouldn't want to see council increase user fees. And on the other hand, give fee waivers to not-for-profits or community groups using the facility at no cost, but then the user fees are so great that it limits access for users. So I don't have any answers. I need some time to think further into this, and I know we're not making any decisions tonight, but I just wanted to draw council's attention to that we somehow need to find that balance.
Any other comments?
I just, I believe that the rec center itself is a capital asset that we as a community corporately all together through our taxation and other methods put together for the benefit of our community, but operational costs are another thing. And I think it's a slippery slope getting into an operational cost efficiency where you actually have, when you start creating both, you create both the facility and now you also create the dependence on free access to it, then you end up in a place that we don't want to go eventually. The operational cost has to be somehow balanced closer. We can't run at a continual loss in the operational side. So I don't know how to get there. Like you mentioned, how difficult it is to find that middle ground, and I agree it is, but we still need to find that middle ground.
So I agree, this is more complicated than it seems, and the report pointed out even to me some things I wasn't thinking about earlier, but there is a legacy plan, right? So there are groups that are seeing fee waivers. We've been talking about it now for really I guess since this council has been working on what because we've been getting more requests for fee waivers. So I don't think fee waivers should always have to come to council, particularly when there's an increasing number of them. So in order to change that, you try to write policy, which will allow staff to go ahead and make these decisions, and at the same time you get benefit to the user groups out there. I never envisioned it. The report really looks at all of it, which I guess we ask staff to do. I never envisioned it for meetings and things like that. I envisioned it more for events. And, you know, I think we can probably look at what that looks like by determining how, you know, what the usage would be. I'm struggling to make my point, which I think we need to move forward. I'd like to see us move forward, not so much in an all-encompassing way, but to limit the numbers of opportunities that somebody can have. And so I see that's in here. It's a maximum number. It's for events that the policy seems to be fine. It's events around, what's the wording that they used? Physical activity, healthy eating, literacy, poverty reduction, community engagement, capacity building, and activities for underserved groups. I would add cultural activities to that. I think that's something that's missing in that statement. But if these groups that are asking come forward, then it means we're putting on more events in the community hall, and so we're enhancing the community by having these events take place. And I think there's a positive side to that. From a cost perspective, if you were to give it away entirely, except for the increase in right now, it's $35,000 a year. It's not that much money. From a cost recovery perspective, and you probably, I agree with your point, you probably never can get to that point where you're getting enough to make it worthwhile. But at the same time, there's got to be some structure around it. There's got to be some limitations to it. Otherwise, you know, if something's free, people potentially just book it all up, and then now you've got a problem on the other side. It's that it's all booked up for free. And so we have to maximize, I think, the opportunities for nonprofit groups to use it, and yet at the same time still allow our own programs and the opportunities for funerals and these legacy items. So sure.
Thanks. So I'm just trying to follow where you're going.
Yeah.
So I think I understand what you're saying, but when you go the next step, it's like, so we're going to try to write policy, which I 100% agree. I don't know how we would get there. Going to give fee waivers for not-for-profits to host whatever criteria we
Events,
set
yeah.
up here, right? So then where is the fairness or equitable for minor hockey or figure skating? Because like right now, could they apply for a fee waiver for a certain amount of money? Cause like, are we just gonna do it for the community hall, or are we thinking the rec center as a whole? So then what does that, going the next step further to complicate it even further is like, how does that pertain to minor hockey, figure skating, and all of the hockey, the old timers, and like on and on it goes?
Yeah.
Like, how do we?
So to
Where
me,
does that-
this is for rooms, and this does not include the ice surface for me. I mean, we've got an entire process there that deals with fairness and the ability to use the ice surface. And I think the costs are probably significantly more, because this did not include ice surface rentals, this report that came forward. So that's not included in the $35,000. To me, it's the hall, the meeting rooms, the things that, are there. And except for the heating costs and the staff time that we put, and even the staff time, if you did decide to take it to meetings, if you look at the report with respect to the rooms that are being used for meetings, using the hall for meetings, we must have other places that we potentially can put meeting spaces where people can have the meetings without using the hall or half the hall. And if you're giving it to them for free, surely they can set the chairs and tables out themselves and put it back after themselves. Many communities that I've been around do that with respect to meetings. You're getting the hall space for free. You're setting it up for free, and that minimizes the amount of cleanup, because now the staff just clean up the floors after. So there are opportunities here for us to deal with the different rooms and the events. For me, it wasn't about the pool. It wasn't about the ice. It was about the rooms that we have, and it's up to council to decide which of those. I mean, that's me saying that it probably shouldn't include the ice surfaces or the pool, but you guys all might have a different perspective on that. But for me, it was about events. It was about expanding the legacy policy that we had that dealt with Remembrance Day, funeral services, Christmas dinner. Like none of those included ice surface or pool or any of that. It was the spaces that are essentially there empty, not being generally used. So I think we can come up with policy it's pretty close. The guidelines are pretty close there already. I think staff are just asking for us to try to give them some guidance with respect to how much. Is it whenever they want, or do you limit it to the numbers? Like quarterly seems fair to me. And if anybody falls outside of that, so once a quarter, a group could put on some kind of a event there that we would waive the fees for in the building, or sorry, in the room spaces. And we see how that goes. If they book and then cancel, I think, I'm starting to get in the weeds a little bit here. If they book it and then cancel it, it should cost them something, I believe. So whether that's a down payment or whether that's one of their other meetings, if they get 4 a year and they book 4 and they cancel one, well, they lose another one, right? They lose one of those bookings, because there should be some consequence to booking the space and then not using it. So I think all of those things could be put into a policy that then would give general direction to staff about the use of the arena and the rooms that we've got. So that's what I thought about driving down the road. So I had a hard time sort of getting my thoughts together there, but those are my thoughts. Councillor Enox?
Yeah, I do agree with you that there should be a maximum use for every group, because if not, then you'll have one group, booking, like you say, booking every second weekend. And I don't know if there's something that we could come up with for the funerals. If something happens and a resident passes and there is something booked in there, depending on what it is, if it's small enough, if we can move that and make exceptions, or
Well, staff must deal with that
Yeah.
now somehow. If there's something booked and there's a funeral coming, I mean,
Cause it's
A little
stressful
bit.
time for the family
Yeah, of
anyways,
course.
and then to have something like that, when everybody as a resident know that, the use is there. If somebody should pass, it would be. I don't know how you would do it, but. Just my
And
thoughts.
because it's new, it's a policy that you have to work for a little while to see what comes out of the woodwork with respect to how many people use it. That's where you start to get a feel for the need, right? Because more and more people will start to book it because they can. It's free. And if it starts to get out of hand, then you need to, I don't think we get it 100% right the first time, but I think we need to move down that road. Because it's part of that overarching policy of government transfers, right? And the things that we're allowing groups to do, whether it's nonprofits or others, right? Because families aren't nonprofits and they're included in the funeral part of this for sure. So it's not just not for nonprofits. Okay.
So is this something that we want to move forward before we get the sustainable service level project? Like, I don't know what the anticipated date for getting that report.
The reason for my comment about that is just that the value of the revenues is a guess, because council sets the value, the fees.
Right.
So, I mean, we can say last year, these were our lost revenues, and frankly, it could be more, it could be less, depending on how many bookings, depending on if fees change as a result of the sustainable. So that's not really something you can hang your hat on, because it's subject to change at any given time for conditions outside of our control. But the staff time, the operational costs, that's really what you're losing, because if suddenly there's a spike in demand and we don't say there's a maximum amount of staff time per event, and people don't have enough volunteers, and now they're depending on our staff, and each event takes 25 hours instead of 4, then that's where the municipality will see a cost. It's not necessarily on the loss of revenue. It's going to be on our cost to deliver the policy, essentially, at whatever it ends up being.
So I guess, yeah, I mean, I'm not as concerned with the loss of revenue because it isn't a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
It's in the big scheme of things, and I have no problem each time I have run for election going to the community to tell them how much their taxes are actually going to support the recreation center. Like, I mean, I can't imagine being here without it. So I never ever have that problem. I just want to make sure that whatever policy that we come up here to increase access for not-for-profits and other groups, that we then don't turn around and increase our user fees to offset that. So I want to make sure that that doesn't happen. And I'm fine with increasing access. I do think that there needs to be a maximum amount, like, because I think, as you have both pointed out, that groups will use it as much as it is available. So whether that's once per quarter or twice a year, whatever council comes up with, I think we absolutely have that. We absolutely have to have that. So those are my 2 points.
So how would you like to move forward? I mean, you've got some guidelines there that I think are fairly sound. I would like to add cultural activities to that usage. Because we've got so many cultures in the community that might want to, put themselves forward if they had the ability. They just might not have had the ability in the past. I'd like to try it with a quarterly, which would give an opportunity for 4 times. And it still doesn't mean that if, that they want to do a bingo a month, they can't pay, after that, right? They get the 4 and then they can pay after that. And then I'm still not sure how much to attach a dollar amount to this, because I'm not sure about the staff time. You've got kind of an average of what we do or what it includes currently, but not everything needs the same amount of staff time. And so I'm just not sure what staff might be comfortable with as far as adding a maximum value there, because that staff time is where our real cost. I mean, the building's there, it's heated already, the space is available. But we pay staff to do that. So I'm still looking for some detail around that, I suppose.
Yeah, one of the pieces of feedback from rec around the legacy events was that they've learned how to maximize their 10 hours.
Yeah.
So they make sure that the activities that they task staff with are the ones that they can't fulfill with volunteer time. So if it's like, you know, putting up hanging things from the ceiling and whatever, that's what they task rec staff in that 10 hours with. And they bring in volunteers for chairs and
The easy
tables and
stuff.
the easy stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe that's something that that's the number of hours established in the existing policy and it carries forward and we just have a look at it in a year to see how it's working. I mean, the report speaks to some rooms and events aren't going to take that amount of time. So that would be your maximum. And then kind of similar, if it's a quarterly and somebody wants 12 a year, they pay the difference. If they go beyond 10 hours, then they pay the difference. It's just, that might be a simple way to kind of carry
To
it.
start it,
Yeah,
start it.
yeah.
Go ahead.
I had just had a thought about, like if there's a, whatever, something booked in the community hall and a resident passes and, you know, we need to provide a venue for a service. I would hate to see the group get kicked out because, you know, like for various reasons, but perhaps, I don't know what we do now. Maybe we haven't run into that situation, which would be great, but maybe this policy could include some sort of wording that the municipality will work with the family to make arrangements with the Phoenix or another area in town. I don't know, that we could help offset those costs or like whatever, instead of kicking out the group.
John, can you speak to the prioritization? I can't remember what it was. Can you put your?
Currently, we've got some of the tight turnarounds. So we've had, where we had a people service that's in at 6, we kind of, that kind of thing, where we just make sure to bring staffing in so we can do that change order, make sure that both events can happen, transport the family as best we can. But if I'm not mistaken, we may have had some services where they went to the Elks instead of our hall.
Right. Yeah.
So they may have, or if it's not. Like you said, if it was a meeting that was in half the hall and they just ran that space and they were available to move over. I think we'll recognize that would be. I don't think you rented that much.
Yeah. Of course, this policy, we might not be experiencing much conflict, but this policy could create that, right? Because all of a sudden the space is being used significantly more than it was before, but you know, I think staff probably are dealing with that and will continue to try to deal with that and you know, funerals can be really on any day. They don't have to be on they don't have to be on a Saturday or Sunday, right? And so it's, yeah, and yeah, we can work. I think the staff can probably work with that. So let's just keep, so I'm just looking at K and L there under the guidelines on page 37 of 59 of the report, and you've got it highlighted. So I think you were looking for some, so I think status quo with respect to the fee, not the waiver, the dollar waiver based on what you're doing with the staff now. I think that's we'll try that. And I think I'm hearing consensus on a quarterly approach to allow 4. And I still would like to see something around if they book it and then cancel, they're being, you know, they lose one of their quarterly opportunities or something like that. So there needs to be, I believe there needs to be a negative consequence to canceling.
Could it simply be a cancellation fee, just to make it
Well,
easy?
I-
Doesn't have to lose a booking or whatever. If you cancel with 48 hours, 72 hours, whatever, there's a fee of whatever.
Yeah, well, that's what this whole policy is trying to get away from, is fees for them, but yeah, so.
Well, I mean, okay, not much different than losing a quarterly
Well,
booking.
yeah, you
know,
don't get to,
keeping
well,
track
it
of
doesn't
all
cost you
that.
anything. It actually doesn't cost you anything to lose that next booking. So now you only get 2 in a year because you canceled one. But anyways, let's let staff figure out whether or not that cancellation fee might work or not. The last thing I wanted to talk about, because it just jumped into my head, I'd thought about it before, but I didn't bring it up, and that's the kitchen bit. So when we give the hall, does the kitchen go with it automatically, or is that a separate booking that needs to, which costs us? It's an
It's an
additional.
additional fee to the hall rental, yeah.
So I'm looking to you who have used it before. Is,
So when we do the Aurora dance, we get the community hall, we apply for the grant for the community hall. We pay for the kitchen and anything above and beyond.
are you generally creating revenue when you're using the kitchen? Like, so is there the opportunity by getting the hall and the kitchen space to create revenue to pay for it? Generally,
Yeah, for the dance we do, the pancake breakfast that we do through the festival, we don't.
Yeah.
It costs us.
I really want to throw that conversation out there about
Because
free
the,
use of,
the pancake
food
breakfast
space.
is for the community and it's free
yeah,
for everybody that attends.
because that has to be, it's a doubling of the cost, right? There's more time there for us to sanitize that space after the fact. So there's significant cost
Yeah.
to the use of kitchens.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see that separate, like us really consider what that,
Yeah, so we pay for the kitchen, but we get the community hall free.
for free, yeah. Yeah. So whatever it ends up looking like, I'd like staff to, and well, I'm looking for you, all your feedback, but that's my perspective, is that the kitchens generally get paid for just because of the costs to clean them after. But I'm interested in what others are thinking about, and I guess the ability to generate revenues because you're using the kitchen should give them the ability to pay for it, is how I'm justifying it. But that's just my thought.
So then
Councillor
what
Kelly?
about dishes? Like, cause you have to pay for dishes and tablecloths and all of that too, right? So.
I don't know enough about it.
Yeah.
It's getting into
It's
the
all
weeds.
separate.
Yeah,
Well,
it's getting
that's-
into the weeds
You also
stuff to
have
some
an
degree,
option
but
to bring that stuff in, so you don't have to, you're not
Yeah.
obligated to use the rec center's equipment.
Okay, so I think that needs to be clear, though, that if
Yeah.
you're giving the community hall for free, or if we are charging X amount of dollars for the kitchen, it doesn't include all of these things,
Yeah.
right?
so if we can, put some specific wording around the use of our kitchens, I guess.
So in the discussion earlier, there was some comments about exclusion, so I'm hearing kitchen would be one. An exclusion from the policy would include the kitchen, potentially the pool, and there was discussion about the arena. But just one thought is that there are some large scale community events that use the dry pads. So maybe being specific about the arena's use, not like off-season use would be eligible, but in ice use would not.
Do you write it as an exclusion or you just write it as the policy? These are the areas that the policy applies to.
That, I mean, that's up to council.
Yeah,
And those are large scale events that have been waived before.
Yeah.
They use the dry pad.
yeah, but we haven't created ice, right? We haven't. Yeah, I mean, you could include the dry pad as part of us, as part of the meeting room spaces or the spaces that were, because there's no ice on it.
So
Okay, go
just to play devil's advocate here, so, you know, I don't want to have a policy that's written that includes every group in the community except for these two or these three. Let's just be really careful. Like, let's not set it up so that, you know,
But it's only.
well, I don't want to argue with you. I
No,
don't want
it's-
to, I
I'm
just
not
want to
gonna
make
argue.
sure that,
The point
you
I want
know,
to make, though, is that those groups still have the same ability to use all the rest of the dry spaces as everybody else does. It is fair for them. This policy does not include the ice surface or the pool. But they have the same ability to book the hall, any of the meeting rooms that apply. They have the same opportunity as everybody else. Their main use, they still have to pay for their main use.
So one school, because Mile 300 and minor hockey use a fair amount of meeting room space and they pay for that throughout the year. They also have their awards banquets and end of year functions that they pay for that space. So I mean, if those were eligible spaces, they could absolutely apply under this policy to exempt those spaces or have those spaces waived. The ice is part of their fees. So yes, it costs them, but they're also recovering that through their player fees. So to to say that they wouldn't be eligible for the policy at all because they depend so much on the ice. There's other, to your point, there's other opportunities for them to potentially access this. And if they were to have mid-year fundraisers or, dry land training or whatever, they would be eligible.
They get the same 4 opportunities.
Yeah.
But thanks for bringing it up. Okay.
I have one comment, only because we're spending so much time on $15,000.
No, 35.
Well, 35,000, but 15,000 is written off. So really it's 50% of our revenue is being written off. So it's a lot of time to be spending on this, but how come we can't could we make a policy that says your hall rental or your facility rental would be eligible to be given to you for free, but staff time is not? Like, I'm thinking about the Hand Game Society. We would have been billed $1,500, which as a fundraising organization, you raise that money to cover your expenses. So I would have no problem paying $1,500 to clean the space if I'm getting $1,500 free facility rent. So I think the policy that includes that staff wages are not part of your write-off, just the facility rent is. Every organization raises money, except for the events planning, raises money and should be able to include that in their budget.
Just an initial thought on that is that, let's say we do provide the space as a rental, would we then, on top of the rental space, would we then be charging prospective corporate clients in addition to the rental? Would we be charging them staff time as well? Or is it just included in that base rental and that's the way it is? So that could potentially make it a little bit complicated, but I think if you're talking staff time, staff is probably the biggest cost of the organization wherever we go. So that could have a deep impact as well. And there's organizations that really just aren't fundraising. They're just putting on these events to enrich the cultural fabric of the community. So I'd say a staff charge could complicate the waiver policy, but it's something we could look into for sure.
And the staff have been included in the past policies, right? It's the way it's been, so it's. All right. You're right. We spent a lot of time on this, but it's a difficult policy when it comes, it's policy that we really only get one crack, well, maybe a couple of cracks at it, but this is our opportunity to have input. Staff will take our ideas away and we asked them to come forward with this because we recognize there was more and more users that were looking for the time. And so how do we deal with that? We deal with it by putting a good policy together, and you might not get it. You might get to perfection the first time, but we're further down the road and the users will get to use it, and then we'll see if we need to modify it moving forward. So does staff have enough information?
My only other question is there a desire to assign a maximum value of any single waiver? So for example, some events are multi-day and could be significant value, and then we're allowing that quarterly. So where like you talk about a bingo, which is like $300, so that group may only access $1,200 a year. If you had 4 hand games tournaments, that could be $10,000 a year. So just for the sake of equity, I don't know if there's a desire, but just another thought. If you want to assign a maximum value to any single waiver.
Go ahead.
So when I was reading this and as we were discussing it, I was thinking like a single use is once per quarter, like one day, not not one multi-day event. That's the way I read this whole thing. Yeah. But is
I'm
that how
saying-
everybody
I'm
else was
saying,
thinking about it?
I had a different thought on it too, though, and that when you actually scroll through the records that are attached to this report, and you actually see that in most cases, we've got seasonal use of the thing, so that we have a 4-quarter policy that now applies to groups that really are seasonal in their meeting needs or their rental needs or their usage needs. And so you're creating a policy that doesn't fit a large portion of the users that need it. So is that wise, or is that something, I
Give me
just,
more details. I'm not understanding.
so you're not understanding it?
No.
Like a lot of the groups that are looking for fee waivers for the rec center are seasonal in when they operate, when they have their meetings.
Like minor hockey.
Like minor
They're,
hockey.
they're
like
really
when-
only
are
active
minor
6 months
hockey's
of the
in the
year,
middle of-
so if it's
Well,
quarterly, they only get 2
There's
claims.
actually, go through the list and look at when they are actually utilizing the fee waivers, and it's very seasonal for most groups.
Mm.
So does that matter? Maybe it doesn't matter.
Or is that because of the way it's been laid out so far? Like, will that
No,
change?
I think it's actually the nature of the groups.
I don't know. It's a tough one.
Good point.
So, I mean, so is it quarterly or is it 4? I mean, 4 per year, or is it quarterly? Does it mean, does it mean the same thing? Does it mean the same thing? It doesn't mean the same thing.
So, but yeah, but. I guess if we're thinking quarterly, that's 4 times a year, and then to Counselor Sol's point, but I think. I don't know what the skating club does, but minor hockey meets
Yeah.
12 months out of the year, so that's a good example to highlight how it could be seasonal for some organizations, but maybe it should be for usages a year, single day event.
Yeah. And anything outside of that can always then come back to council.
Or they
Right.
can pay,
If
yeah.
it's out, if they can pay, or they, or if they think they can modify it somehow to better work for them, then they can always bring it to council, right? So, yeah, so policy development is like a sausage, like, you don't necessarily want to see how it's being done, but this is how it's done, right?
I just
You
wanna make the
brainstorm
point
it, you
too.
talk it, and staff gets some ideas.
Not
from
just
us.
about the money, right? It's about getting the policy
Right.
as accurate and as reflective of the community needs as we can. And I think I think it's worth every single hour that's spent into it. And there will be revisions, and
Yeah.
the next council can come along and do their own thing with it too, right? So.
Yeah. Okay, so you have enough direction? Okay, then we are adjourned until 6:30. I think that was the end.